The little black girl grabbed the biker on the sidewalk, claiming someone had followed her home since noon. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. It was a warm, quiet afternoon in the city of Tucson. The streets were bustling with life, people walking to and from their destinations, some in a hurry, others just enjoying the day. But then, something unexpected happened that would change everything. A young black girl, no older than 9, appeared out of nowhere, running down the sidewalk, her face streaked with tears, her breathing quick and shallow. She was barefoot, and her clothes were disheveled, clearly not the look of a child out for a carefree walk. As she reached the corner, her eyes locked onto a biker standing near his motorcycle, parked by the sidewalk. Without hesitation, she grabbed the biker's leather jacket and, with a voice filled with desperation, she whispered, "Please, help me. Someone has been following me since noon." The biker, a tall man with a rough exterior and a face marked by years of experience, froze for a moment. His first instinct was to push her away, thinking she might be just another runaway or a kid playing tricks. But something in her eyes stopped him. There was genuine fear there. His hands, calloused from years of gripping handlebars, instinctively reached out to steady her, guiding her away from the busy street and into the relative safety of the alley next to the parking lot. "Who's been following you, kid?" he asked, his voice low and steady, trying to keep calm. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear, and said, "I don't know. A man. He's been watching me all day. I think he wants to hurt me." The biker could see the panic in her eyes, and his protective instincts kicked in. He was no stranger to danger. After all, he had been part of the Thunderwolves motorcycle club for over a decade. He had seen enough to know when something wasn't right. "All right, stay with me," he said, keeping his voice firm but gentle. He looked around, noticing the few people still walking nearby, unaware of the fear this little girl was experiencing. He needed to act quickly. "You did the right thing by coming to me," he said, trying to reassure her as they stood there in the shadow of the building. "But now, we need to get you somewhere safe. Do you know where your parents are?" The girl shook her head, her lips trembling. "My mom's at work. My dad's gone. I don't know what to do. He's been following me for hours, and I don't feel safe anymore." The biker's heart went out to her. No child should ever feel like that. He made a quick decision. "Listen, kid, I'm going to help you. But first, I need you to stay here with my friend while I call in some backup. We're going to make sure this guy doesn't get anywhere near you, understand?" The girl nodded, her small hands clutching his jacket as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded in the world. As the biker pulled out his phone, he sent a message to his club, summoning the others. They needed to find this man, and fast. He wasn't about to let anyone hurt this child. Not while he had breath in his lungs. "Stay close to me," he told her as he moved back to the bike, getting ready to take off. But deep inside, he knew that this was no ordinary situation. This was the beginning of something bigger than a simple chase. This was about protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. And he wasn't going to let anything happen to her. I could feel the tension rise as we stood in the shadow of the alley. The little girl's grip tightened on my jacket, her wide eyes darting around nervously. She had barely spoken since telling me about the man who'd been following her all afternoon, and I couldn't blame her. Fear was written all over her face, and I wasn't sure who was more terrified, her or me. I kept my hand on my phone, eyes scanning the area, ready to call for backup. It wasn't just any regular stalker we were dealing with. There was something off about this whole situation. I turned back to her and asked gently, "What's your name, kid?" She looked up at me, still trembling. "Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Maya," I repeated softly. "We're gonna get you home, okay? Just hang tight with me." I pulled out my phone and typed out a quick message to the Thunderwolves Motorcycle Club. Within moments, I had responses flooding in, each one confirming their support. They were already mobilizing. I needed to stay calm and be the leader they trusted me to be. I could already hear the engines revving in the distance, signaling the arrival of the pack. But even as I reassured Maya, I knew that we were in for a much bigger fight. This wasn't just a random kid in danger. This was something personal. Something dangerous. Maya had barely stopped crying when I turned back to her. Maya, I said softly. Can you tell me a little more about this man? Why do you think he's been following you? Her lip quivered before she spoke again. He's been watching me for days. I think he knows where I live. He's always there, just standing there, staring at me. And every time I turn to look, he disappears. I felt a chill run down my spine. That didn't sound like a random stalker. This guy knew what he was doing. He was playing a game, and we were caught right in the middle of it. Okay, listen to me, I said, kneeling down to her level. You're safe now, all right? I'm gonna make sure nothing happens to you. We'll find this guy, and we'll stop him. You're not alone anymore. The roar of engines reached us, growing louder by the second. Maya flinched at the sound, but I could see the relief in her eyes as she realized the bikers were here. One by one, the Thunder Wolves arrived, engines rumbling like a force of nature. There were a dozen of us now, spread across the street and ready to move. No one spoke as we gathered around Maya, forming a protective circle. I gave the order, and the group silently split into teams, ready to search the area for the man Maya had described. We were used to dealing with trouble, but this felt different. The way Maya spoke about him, the way he seemed to always be lurking, always watching, made my skin crawl. Stay close, Maya, I said, and she nodded, clutching my jacket tighter. We moved as one, circling the block, searching for any sign of this man. But he was good. He knew how to disappear into the shadows, how to blend in with the crowd. As the sun started to dip below the horizon, the streets began to empty, and the feeling of danger grew thicker. I could feel it in the air, a kind of unease that spread through the group like wildfire. After an hour of searching, we found nothing. It was as if the man had vanished. But then, I heard it, a faint noise coming from an alley. The unmistakable sound of a car engine. It was distant at first, but then it got louder. I signaled the team to stay alert. We approached the alley slowly, making sure not to alert anyone. As we turned the corner, I saw it, a black sedan, parked in the shadows, its engine running. The car was a few blocks down from where Maya had been. We weren't alone anymore. I could feel eyes on us from the dark corners of the street. This wasn't just a random encounter anymore. Whoever this guy was, he was making his move. Stay behind me, Maya, I whispered as I moved forward, stepping into the alley with one of my bikers at my side. The car remained still, but I could feel the tension rise with every step we took. It was like walking into the eye of a storm. We stopped just short of the vehicle, waiting for any movement. The door creaked open slowly, and I braced myself for the worst. Out stepped a man, tall, with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. He didn't seem surprised to see us, but there was no mistaking the danger in his stance. He was the one who'd been following Maya. I took a step forward, my voice steady but firm. We need to talk, I said, my eyes locked on his. You've been following this girl for too long, and you're not going to get away with it. The man said nothing at first, his gaze flicking between me and Maya, who stood behind me, clutching my jacket. Then he smiled, cold, calculated, like he knew something we didn't. You really think you can stop me? He said, his voice low and dangerous. And that was when I knew this wasn't just a random stalker. This was someone with a plan, and we had just stepped into it. The stakes had just gotten higher. We weren't just protecting a little girl anymore. We were about to take down something far bigger, something far more dangerous. And I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. I could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. The man in front of me, his eyes cold and calculating, hadn't moved. He knew something we didn't, and it was clear that this wasn't just a random incident. This was something planned. I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists, but I kept my voice calm. Listen, we're not here for a fight. We're here to make sure she's safe. I nodded back to Maya, who stood behind me, her eyes wide but filled with a quiet strength she hadn't had when we first met. She had been through enough. You've been stalking this girl for hours. I want to know why, I said, my voice sharp but controlled. The man just smiled, a tight, sinister grin that didn't reach his eyes. You really think you're going to intimidate me? You're wasting your time, he sneered. I could feel the tension rise in the air, every muscle in my body screaming for action. My brothers in the club had circled behind, watching the situation closely, ready to step in if needed. I turned to them, making sure they stayed back, but stayed alert. This wasn't just about Maya anymore. It was personal. The man was the one pulling the strings. And he wasn't just any random creep. He was tied to something bigger, something dangerous. I looked back at him. You're right. We don't need to intimidate you. But we're not backing down. Maya is off limits. Whatever game you're playing, it ends here. Now. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my resolve. You think you can stop me? He asked, his tone a mixture of amusement and disbelief. It's not just me, I said, nodding at the rest of the crew, who were now in full formation, bikes revving up just outside the alley. We're all here. And we don't leave family behind. The man's grin faltered for just a second, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. He hadn't expected this level of support, this level of determination. But it was too late for him to back out now. His hand went to his pocket, and my heart raced, thinking he was reaching for a weapon. But instead, he pulled out his phone. You think I'm scared of you? He laughed, his voice cold. I'm not the one who should be scared. I narrowed my eyes, sensing the trap. What are you talking about? The man didn't respond immediately. He just looked at his phone screen, a smug smile curling his lips. Then, he turned it to show me. You think you're protecting her? I've already got the law on my side. You don't even know who you're messing with. My stomach dropped as I saw the message on his phone. It was a photo of Maya, taken when she wasn't looking, from a distance. He had been watching her all along. I could feel the blood rush to my face. He was working with someone. He wasn't acting alone. He wasn't just stalking her. He had an agenda, and I had walked right into it. What do you want from her? I demanded, my voice tight with anger. The man's expression darkened. It's not about what I want, he said, his voice low and dangerous now. It's about what she owes. And I've come to collect. My mind raced. What did he mean by what she owes? How was Maya connected to whatever twisted game he was playing? I turned to Maya, who looked confused but still held her ground. She didn't understand either, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Maya, are you okay? Do you know this man? I asked gently. Maya shook her head, her voice trembling. No, I don't know him. But I've seen him before. He used to come around my school. He was always standing by the gate, just watching me. Her words trailed off as she glanced up at him, her fear becoming clearer. What does he want with me? The man stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. You're part of a much bigger picture than you realize, little girl. Your father, he owed me. And now, it's time to settle the debt. My heart skipped a beat. Her father? What are you talking about? I stepped forward, my voice rising. Her father is dead, I said firmly, trying to keep the panic at bay. The man looked at me, his eyes cold. Don't play dumb. I'm not here for some small-time deal. I'm here because Maya's father made a deal with the wrong people. And she's the key to it all. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Maya's father wasn't just some random guy. He had been involved with people like this man. Dangerous, powerful people. And now Maya was caught in the crossfire. I had to protect her. I had to stop whatever this was before it went any further. I didn't care about the threats, the law, or anything else. This was about family. You don't get to take her. You don't get to use her for whatever game you're playing. I said, my voice low and steady. And if you don't leave right now, you'll regret it. The man sneered, but his expression faltered when he saw the determination in my eyes. It was clear he hadn't expected anyone to stand up to him, not like this. He glanced back at his car, then at the bikers behind me. He knew he wasn't going to win this one. Fine, he spat. But you haven't heard the last of me. This isn't over. And with that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the alley. But I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Maya was safe for now, but there were bigger forces at play, and I wasn't going to let them hurt her. Not while I still had breath in my lungs. I could feel the tension easing slightly as the man turned and walked away, but I knew it wasn't over. He had left, for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. I turned back to Maya, who stood behind me, still trembling but clearly relieved. Her eyes were wide, full of fear and confusion, and I could tell she still didn't fully understand what was happening. I stepped toward her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You're safe now, Maya, I said softly, trying to reassure her. But we need to keep you protected. Do you understand? She nodded silently, but I could see the weight of everything settling on her young shoulders. I'm scared, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I knelt down to her level, looking her straight in the eye. I know, but I promise, you're not alone. We're going to make sure nothing happens to you. That's what family does. She managed a small nod, and I could see a glimmer of trust in her eyes. I wasn't going to let anyone harm her, not while I had breath in my lungs. I turned to the rest of the group. All right, we need to get Maya somewhere safe. The club's got her back. We'll move her to one of the safe houses, lay low for a while, and figure out who's behind all of this. The bikers nodded in agreement, but I could see the unease in their faces. We all knew this was only a small part of a much bigger puzzle. The man who had stalked Maya wasn't just some random stranger. He was part of something far darker, something we weren't yet prepared for. But that wasn't going to stop us. We would find out who he was working for, and we would stop them. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. Let's get moving. We don't have time to waste. The bikers started to mount their bikes, revving the engines as the roar of the motorcycles filled the alley. Maya climbed onto my bike, her small frame pressed against me. She was still scared, but I could tell she felt a little safer now. The sound of the engines fading into the distance was a comforting sign that we were leaving the danger behind. We rode through the streets of the city, the wind rushing past, but it wasn't enough to shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept glancing over at Maya, making sure she was okay. Her grip on me was tight, but I could tell she was starting to relax. We're almost there, Maya, I said over the hum of the engine. You're going to be all right. But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. As we approached the safe house, I saw the other bikers waiting outside, watching for any signs of trouble. We had to be careful. We didn't know who else might be out there, or if they were watching us. We pulled up to the house, and I helped Maya off the bike, leading her inside. The house was quiet, almost eerily so, but it was secure. It was just what we needed. Stay here, Maya, I told her gently as I closed the door behind her. You'll be safe here. I'll make sure no one gets to you. Maya nodded, and I could see the weight of her fears start to lift, even if only slightly. I turned to the rest of the crew. We need to gather more information. Whoever that guy was, he's part of something much bigger. We can't afford to wait around. Let's hit the streets, find out who he's working with, and figure out what their plan is. As we made our way back to our bikes, I felt the air shift around us. The calm before the storm. The bikers moved with purpose, eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. This wasn't just about protecting Maya anymore. This was about taking down the network that had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. We were ready to face whatever came next, and nothing was going to stop us. We were a family, and we protected our own. The night was just beginning, and the ride ahead was going to be long. But I knew that as long as we stuck together, we could take on anything. As we roared down the dark streets, I couldn't help but think about the man who had followed Maya. He might have thought he had the upper hand, but he didn't know what he was up against. We were going to make sure he never laid a hand on her again. I stood in the dimly lit room, staring out the window at the empty streets. The calm of the night was unsettling, knowing what was waiting for us just beyond the horizon. The bikers were back at the safe house, gathering information, making sure that Maya was still secure. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was far from over. The man who had been following her, he wasn't just a random stalker. I knew that now. He was part of something bigger, something more dangerous, and we needed to find out what it was. I couldn't let my guard down, not when Maya's life was still at risk. As I turned away from the window, I heard footsteps behind me. It was one of the guys, Storm, his boots heavy on the wooden floor as he approached. Any word? I asked without turning around. Nothing solid yet, Storm said, his voice low. But we've got eyes on the streets. If he shows up again, we'll know. I nodded. That was good enough for now. We were keeping our eyes open, waiting for the right moment to strike. The next move had to be calculated. I'll be outside, I said, heading for the door. Storm gave a quick nod and turned to follow me, but I held up a hand. Stay here. Keep an eye on Maya. She needs to feel safe, and I need to keep the focus on finding the next step. We're not done yet. He hesitated but didn't argue, watching me as I walked out into the night. The streets were quieter now, the sounds of the city muffled by the stillness of the hour. It was almost like the calm before a storm, and I had a feeling that storm was coming sooner rather than later. As I made my way down the sidewalk, I kept my head low, trying to stay under the radar. The last thing I needed was attention, especially now that I knew there were bigger forces involved. The man who had been following Maya wasn't just a rogue actor. He was tied to something much deeper, and I needed to find out who else was involved. I reached my bike, resting my hand on the handlebars for a moment before kicking the engine to life. The low rumble of the motor was a comfort, steady and reliable. I wasn't going to let anything happen to Maya, not while I had breath in my lungs. I pulled out onto the road, my headlights cutting through the darkness as I sped toward the nearest diner. It was one of the few places where people still talked, still spread rumors, and I needed to hear what was being said. When I arrived, the diner was nearly empty, save for a few truckers and a waitress cleaning the counter. I parked my bike outside and made my way in, the bell above the door jingling as I entered. The waitress glanced up as I stepped in, recognition flickering in her eyes. "You here for the usual?" she asked, her tone casual but sharp. I shook my head. "Not today. I'm looking for information. You heard anything about a guy in a black sedan, maybe a few days ago? He's been following a little girl, making a lot of noise." The waitress frowned, wiping her hands on a rag. "I've heard whispers. Some guy in a black car? Yeah, people have seen him around. Not the first time he's shown up in this area. People say he's been asking about the girl. And I heard someone say he's connected to the Serpents." My stomach dropped. The Serpents. I had heard of them, of course. They were one of the more dangerous motorcycle clubs in the area, known for their ruthless business dealings and violent methods. But they were also connected to a lot of shady characters, people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone who got in their way. "Do you know who he is?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She shook her head. "Not exactly, but I've seen him around. Always in the car. Doesn't get out much. But I heard from one of the truckers that he's got ties with some people higher up in the Serpents ranks." That was all I needed to hear. I thanked her and left a few bills on the counter before heading back to my bike. As I rode back to the safe house, my mind raced. The Serpents were involved. This was no longer just about a little girl and a stalker. This was about something much bigger, something much darker. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. I parked outside the safe house and walked in, my thoughts still spinning. Maya was sitting in the living room, looking more at ease than she had earlier, but still a little shaken. I sat down next to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Maya, I need you to listen carefully," I said. She looked up at me, her eyes full of trust. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you. But we've got to be careful. There are people involved in this, people connected to the Serpents. Do you understand?" She nodded, her expression serious now. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. I could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't just some scared little girl anymore. She was part of this too, and she was stronger than I had first thought. "Good," I said, squeezing her shoulder. "Now, we've got a plan, and we're going to stick to it. No matter what happens, we stay together, got it?" She nodded again, and I could see the faintest hint of a smile on her face. It was small, but it was enough. I wasn't alone in this anymore. We were in it together. And we were going to take down whoever was behind all of this. I sat there in the dimly lit room, my mind racing as I reviewed everything that had happened so far. Maya was safe, for now. But the fact that the Serpents were involved only meant one thing. This was bigger than I had imagined. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. The man we had confronted earlier, the one who had been stalking Maya, wasn't acting alone. There was a whole network of people out there, and they were connected to a much darker world. I couldn't let my guard down. Not when Maya's life was still at risk. I glanced over at her. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to the window, still processing everything. It was hard to imagine what it must be like for her, being so young and already caught in a situation like this. But she was strong. Stronger than most people gave her credit for. I had to keep reminding myself that she wasn't a helpless victim. She had already shown that she could stand up for herself, and I knew she was going to make it through this. "We need to find out more about the Serpents," I said, turning to my crew. "They're involved in this, and we need to know exactly who we're dealing with." One of the bikers, Phantom, nodded in agreement. "I'll talk to some of the old contacts. See if anyone knows more about them," he said, his voice steady. "We need to be prepared. This could get ugly." I looked around at the rest of the crew. We had been through a lot together, but this was different. This wasn't just another gang war or a turf battle. This was about protecting a little girl from people who had no moral compass. And I wasn't going to let them win. "All right, everyone. We move out in an hour. Phantom, you're on recon. The rest of us will spread out and make sure Maya stays safe." The group nodded, ready for action. But as I looked back at Maya, I saw the doubt in her eyes. She was trying to stay calm, trying to be brave, but I knew this was taking a toll on her. I walked over to her and sat down next to her. "Hey, you holding up all right?" I asked softly. She nodded but didn't say anything. Her fingers were playing with the hem of her sleeve, a nervous habit I had seen before. I know this is scary, I continued, but we're going to make sure you're safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. She finally looked at me, her eyes wide and vulnerable. But what if they come for me again? What if they hurt me? I could hear the fear in her voice, and it broke my heart. But I couldn't show any weakness. I had to be strong for her. They won't. We're not going to let them. You're with us now. We're going to protect you. I reached over and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. She squeezed back, and for the first time in a while, I saw a small, genuine smile on her face. Thanks, she said softly. I trust you. It was enough to make everything worth it. I got up and turned to the rest of the crew. Let's get to work, I said. We're not going to let anyone hurt her. We all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a job. This was about loyalty, about family. The next few hours felt like a blur as we moved quickly, setting up surveillance, talking to informants, and making sure Maya was safe at all times. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The Serpents were out there, and I knew they were planning something. We had to stay one step ahead. The night passed slowly, and the tension in the air was almost unbearable. But as the first light of dawn broke through the windows, we had gathered enough information to take the next step. We knew who we were up against. We knew the men behind this, and we knew that we couldn't afford to wait any longer. It was time to make our move. I walked back into the room where Maya was resting. We're ready, I said, my voice steady. It's time to end this. Maya looked up at me, her face a little less tense than before. She had been through so much, and yet here she was, still standing. I'm ready, she said quietly. I gave her a nod, feeling a surge of pride for how far she had come. All right, let's get moving. We had a plan, and we were going to execute it. There was no turning back now. The Serpents had made their move, and we were going to make sure they regretted it. As we headed out the door, I felt a sense of determination rise in me. This was it. This was our moment. And I wasn't going to let anyone stand in our way. I stood at the front of the house, watching the morning light filter through the trees, a quiet moment before the storm. The air was thick with tension. We had everything in place. Maya was safe, for now, but the danger was far from over. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The Serpents were still out there, and we needed to make sure they didn't get the upper hand. I turned to the crew, all of them ready for whatever was coming next. The engines of our bikes hummed quietly in the background, a steady reminder that we were a force to be reckoned with. All right, everyone, I said, my voice calm but firm. We know who we're dealing with. We've got a plan, and it's time to execute it. We're going to hit them hard, take out the leaders, and make sure they know we're not backing down. The crew nodded in unison, their expressions hardening with determination. Phantom, you're on the inside. You've got the contacts. Get us what we need to take down the Serpents. Everyone else, we're hitting their hideout in 30 minutes. We've got the element of surprise, but we can't waste it. Let's move fast, no mistakes. Phantom gave a sharp nod, already on his phone, working his contacts. Got it. I'll have the intel we need. Just make sure we're ready when the time comes. I turned to Maya, who had been sitting quietly in the living room, her small hands clutching the hem of her jacket. She had been through so much, and it broke my heart to see. The weight of the world on her young shoulders. But she was strong, stronger than I had realized. She was ready for this. Maya, I said gently, crouching down to her level. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with trust and a hint of fear. I need you to stay here. We're going to take care of everything, but you've got to stay safe. Can you do that? She nodded without hesitation. I trust you, she said softly, her voice steady. It was the first time I had heard her speak with such certainty. It meant everything to me. Good, I said, giving her a reassuring smile. We'll be back before you know it. I stood up and turned back to the crew. Let's move out. Keep it tight, keep it clean. We don't know what we're walking into, but we're walking out with the job done. No one gets left behind. The engines roared to life as we mounted our bikes, the sound of the motorcycles cutting through the still morning air like a warning. We rode through the streets, the wind whipping past us, but my focus was sharp. I wasn't going to let anything stand in our way. The Serpents had made their move, but they didn't know who they were messing with. We were a family, and we fought for each other. As we approached the hideout, I signaled for the group to slow down. We needed to be smart about this. We couldn't afford to give them any advantage. I gave Phantom a quick glance. He was ready. We all were. We hit fast. We hit hard. I said, voice steady. No hesitation. We parked our bikes a few blocks away, moving on foot from there. The hideout was a rundown warehouse, the kind of place you'd expect to see in an action movie. It looked deserted, but I knew better than to trust appearances. We approached slowly, staying in the shadows, listening for any sounds of movement. We weren't the only ones who knew how to stay quiet. The place was eerily still, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking straight into a trap. But there was no turning back now. "Phantom, what's the word?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Phantom checked his phone, his eyes scanning the area. "We're good. They're all inside. No backup yet. We've got the element of surprise, but we need to move fast." I nodded, signaling to the crew to spread out. "Let's go. Stay sharp." We moved in, our footsteps silent on the cracked concrete. As we neared the warehouse door, I motioned for everyone to stop. I could hear voices inside, low and muffled, but there was no mistaking the tension in the air. The Serpents were preparing for something, and we were about to ruin it. I pulled the door open slowly, just enough to slip inside. The room was dark, filled with the smell of oil and rust. In the corner, I saw them, 3 of the Serpents, sitting around a table, their backs to us. They didn't see us coming. The plan was simple. We were going to take them out, one by one, before they knew what hit them. I signaled to the crew, and we moved in. The first one never saw it coming. A quick knock on the head, and he was down. The second one was faster, but not fast enough. He was on the floor before he even had time to reach for his gun. The third one scrambled for his phone, trying to make a call, but Phantom was on him before he could dial. We had them. The Serpents never knew what hit them. I stood over them, breathing heavily, but I knew this wasn't the end. This was just a small victory. There were more of them, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. We weren't just a group of bikers. We were a family, and we would protect Maya at all costs. I looked around at my crew, each of them standing tall and ready. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. But we just made sure they know they can't mess with us. We moved quickly, clearing the rest of the warehouse, making sure no one else was hiding. We had done our part, but the war was just beginning. I could feel the weight of what we had just done, the victory hanging in the air like the scent of gasoline and burnt rubber. We had taken out 3 of the Serpents without a hitch, but I knew that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The warehouse was eerily quiet. Now, the only sound coming from the soft hum of our bikes parked outside. We had done the first part of the job, but now we needed answers. And I wasn't going to leave until we had them. I walked over to one of the Serpents, the one who had been trying to make a phone call when we took him down. He was still groggy, but he wasn't unconscious. "Who else is involved?" I asked him, my voice cold. He blinked up at me, his eyes wild with fear. He wasn't going to make it easy, but I didn't care. "You really think I'm going to talk?" he sneered, trying to shift away from me. "I know who you are," I said, stepping closer. "You're part of the Serpents, and you're part of a bigger problem. So you're going to tell me who else is involved, or I'll make sure you regret it." The man's face hardened, and for a moment, I thought he might not break. But then I saw the fear flash in his eyes again. "Fine," he said, his voice shaky. "There's a meeting. Tomorrow night. At the old warehouse on 5th and Main. That's where the big guys are. They'll be there." I nodded, giving him a look that told him I was done with the games. "You just saved yourself a world of trouble. Now get out of my sight." I turned to Phantom, who had been keeping watch over the rest of the crew. "You hear that?" I asked. Phantom nodded, his expression grim. "Yeah, I heard. 5th and Main, tomorrow night." I took a deep breath, running a hand through my hair. It was happening. The Serpents were preparing for something big, and we were going to be there to stop it. "Let's get back to the house," I said, turning toward the exit. "We need to regroup and make sure Maya is still safe. Tomorrow, we go in." As we walked out of the warehouse, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything on my shoulders. We were walking into the heart of the storm, and I knew that the Serpents weren't going to back down without a fight. But I wasn't afraid. We had a job to do, and we were going to do it. The ride back to the safe house was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. We knew what was at stake, and we knew that this fight was far from over. When we got back, I walked straight into the living room, where Maya was sitting, still looking uneasy. She stood up when she saw me, her eyes searching mine. "What happened?" she asked, her voice small. I smiled at her, trying to ease her worries. "We've got the next step," I said. "Tomorrow night, we hit them hard. You're going to stay here, safe." We'll handle the rest. Maya didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. Be careful, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I crouched down to her level, giving her a reassuring smile. We will. You stay here and keep safe. You're not alone, Maya. We're all in this together. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too, something I hadn't seen before. It was hope. Thank you, she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you. You don't have to worry about that, I replied, giving her a hug. You're not alone. We're family, and family takes care of each other. I stood up, feeling a renewed sense of determination. The time was coming. We were going to take down the serpents and make sure they never hurt anyone again. But I couldn't help but think that there was something more we hadn't uncovered yet. There was still one last piece to the puzzle, and I wasn't leaving until I found it. As the crew gathered around, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on me. Tomorrow, we go to war, and I wasn't going to stop until the job was done. All right, everyone, I said, looking at each member of the crew. Tomorrow night, we do this. We move fast, we move hard. We take out the leaders, and we make sure they don't get back up. The bikers nodded in agreement, their faces hard with resolve. We've got your back, Phantom said, his voice unwavering. We'll make sure they don't hurt anyone again. I nodded, my heart pounding with anticipation. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, we take down the serpents once and for all. I stood in front of the safe house, my hands gripping the handlebars of my bike. The night had settled in, but there was no peace in my mind. I could feel the weight of the coming storm pressing on my chest. Tomorrow was the day we finally took the fight to the serpents. It had been a long road to get here, but the end was near, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone stand in our way. I glanced over at Maya, who was standing just inside the door, her figure silhouetted by the dim light inside. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and determination. I had seen that look in people before. She was ready. She was stronger than most people gave her credit for. She'd been through hell already, but she wasn't backing down. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Maya nodded, her gaze unwavering. I'm not going to let them win, she said quietly. I smiled, a proud but sad smile. I never thought I'd see the day a kid like you would be this brave. But you've got more courage than most grown-ups I know. Maya shifted her weight slightly, her arms folded tightly across her chest. I have to be brave. For you. For everyone. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was scared, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. She had already seen what this world could do, and now she was ready to fight back. I turned away for a moment, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow was a big day, and I needed to be sharp. The serpents had no idea what they were about to face. The time for hiding was over. The night seemed to stretch on forever as I paced back and forth. My thoughts were racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. We had the upper hand, but I knew the serpents would fight back hard. They were dangerous, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. But that's why we were here. That's why we had to do this. We couldn't let them win. We're ready, Phantom said, walking into the room, breaking me out of my thoughts. The crew's set. We've got the intel we need. We move in tomorrow at nightfall. I nodded, looking at the crew members who had gathered in the room. They were all here, ready for battle. We were a family, and we're going to do whatever it took to protect Maya. All right, I said, my voice steady. This is it. Tomorrow, we hit them hard. We take the serpents down, no hesitation. We know where they're meeting, and we know who's behind it all. We move fast, we move together. No one gets left behind. The bikers nodded in unison, their expressions hard, their determination unwavering. They weren't just in this for the fight. They were in it for the cause. For Maya. We'll be ready, one of the bikers, Diesel, said. We'll make sure they regret ever crossing us. I gave him a nod of approval. We'll make sure they remember who they're messing with. The room fell silent for a moment, everyone lost in their own thoughts. This wasn't just another fight. This was personal. We were going to make sure the serpents never hurt anyone again. As the night dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The storm was building, and it was only a matter of time before it hit. I stood by the window, watching the street outside. The stillness in the air only made the anticipation worse. I had to be ready. For Maya. For the crew. For everything we had worked for. I turned back to the group. We go in tomorrow. But remember, this isn't just about us. This is about stopping them from hurting anyone else. We're doing this for the people who can't fight back. We're doing this for Maya. The crew nodded, each of them understanding what was at stake. This wasn't just about taking down a gang. This was about saving lives. The clock ticked on, each second bringing us closer to the moment when everything would change. We were ready. I turned back to Maya one last time before we headed out. Stay safe here. We'll be back before you know it. She nodded, her eyes steady, but I could see the fear still there. But there was something else, too, hope. I had promised her we'd protect her, and I wasn't going to break that promise. I walked out with the crew, my heart heavy, but my resolve strong. Tomorrow, we made our move. Tomorrow, we took the Serpents down, and nothing was going to stop us. I stood in the shadows of the warehouse, the dim light of the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. The air was thick with tension, each of us fully aware that tonight could change everything. We had a plan, and now it was time to execute it. The Serpents had no idea we were coming. They thought they could operate without consequence, but they were about to learn otherwise. We had the intel we needed, and I was determined to make sure this ended tonight. I glanced over at my crew, the Thunderwolves, standing together, ready for what was about to come. We had been through countless battles, but this was different. This wasn't just about taking down a gang. This was about protecting a young girl, making sure the Serpents would never hurt anyone again. I could feel the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. Maya was safe, for now, but we couldn't afford to let our guard down. She had already been through so much, and I wasn't going to let anything happen to her. All right, listen up, I said, my voice low but steady. We know what we're walking into. The Serpents are all inside, and we've got to hit them fast, hit them hard. No hesitation. We do this by the book, but we're not backing down. The crew nodded, each of them moving with purpose. We had the element of surprise on our side, and we weren't going to waste it. Phantom, I said, turning to him, you're leading the charge. Get us in there, and make sure we clear the place out. No mistakes. Phantom nodded, his expression hard. Got it. We'll move fast. No one gets left behind. I turned to the others. The rest of us will follow, keep the pressure on. We don't stop until we've got them all. We take out the leaders, and we make sure they know we don't back down. There was no argument. We were a family, and this was personal. We moved in quickly, spreading out to surround the building. The sound of our bikes was the only noise in the otherwise silent night, each engine growling like a warning to anyone who dared to cross us. We were a force to be reckoned with, and tonight, the Serpents were going to learn that the hard way. I kept my eyes on the warehouse, watching for any signs of movement. We were getting closer, and I could feel the adrenaline building. This was the moment we had been waiting for. As we reached the front of the building, I signaled for everyone to stop. The warehouse loomed in front of us, its dark windows offering no glimpse of what was inside. We knew they were there, though. We could feel their presence, the energy shifting in the air. We were about to take the fight to them. I turned to Phantom. You ready? I asked, my voice steady. He nodded, his eyes locked on the door ahead. We're going in. Stay close, stay sharp, and no one gets left behind. We moved in, our steps synchronized as we approached the entrance. The door was locked, but we didn't need to worry about that. Phantom had the tools, and within seconds, we were inside. The moment we stepped through the door, I could feel it, the tension, the sense of impending danger. But we were ready. We were here to finish this. We spread out, covering each corner of the warehouse. The lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I signaled for the crew to keep their eyes peeled. We couldn't afford to let anyone escape. As we moved deeper into the building, I could hear voices ahead. They were talking, but it was too quiet to make out the words. I signaled to Phantom, who led the way. We were getting closer. I could feel it in my gut. We were almost there. As we reached the next room, I saw them, 3 of the Serpents, standing in a circle, discussing something in hushed tones. They didn't see us coming. Phantom made a quick gesture, and we moved in. The first Serpent never had a chance. A swift move, and he was down before he could even react. The others scrambled to grab their weapons, but it was too late. Phantom was on them in seconds, taking them out one by one. We didn't hesitate. We couldn't afford to. This wasn't just a fight. It was a statement. We were taking down their operation, one piece at a time. I stood there, watching the scene unfold, my heart racing with adrenaline. We had the upper hand. The Serpents were disorganized, panicked. They had no idea what hit them. But we weren't done yet. We had to find the leader, the one pulling the strings. Where's the boss? I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. One of the serpents, barely conscious, pointed toward the back of the warehouse. Back there, he's in the office. I didn't waste a second. Move out, I ordered. We stormed toward the office, the sound of our boots echoing in the empty warehouse. As we reached the door, I could see the leader, Marcus Viper Santana, standing inside, a smirk on his face. He knew we were coming, but he wasn't scared. You think you can just come in here and take me down? He sneered, his hands resting on the desk in front of him. You're messing with the wrong people. I stepped forward, my eyes locked on his. This ends tonight, Viper. You don't get to hurt anyone else. You don't get to hide behind your crew anymore. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think this is over? You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with. I wasn't going to give him the chance to say anything else. With a swift motion, I lunged forward, knocking him to the ground. The fight was on, but I knew one thing for sure. We weren't walking out of here without finishing what we started. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins as Viper hit the ground, but there was no time to relish the victory. The moment I knocked him down, the room erupted into chaos. His crew, the remaining serpents, scrambled to regroup, realizing they had lost their leader. I couldn't let them get their footing back. Phantom, Diesel, and the others moved swiftly, taking positions and securing the exits. We weren't just here to fight. We were here to end it all. Stay down, Viper, I growled, stepping forward to keep him on the ground. His smirk hadn't wavered. He was good. Too good. This wasn't over. You think you've won? He spat, blood trickling from his mouth. This is just the beginning, biker. You don't know who you're messing with. I knelt down beside him, grabbing his collar and lifting his head up. You're not getting away with this, I said coldly. We're done playing your games. You're going to tell me everything I need to know, or this is going to get a lot worse for you. He laughed, a low, rattling laugh that sent chills down my spine. You really think you can stop it? My people? The serpents. I grabbed him by the shirt, shaking him slightly. Your people? Your people are nothing. It's just you, Viper. Just you, and you're going down. So, stop stalling and tell me who else is involved. Viper's eyes flickered with hesitation. For a moment, I thought he might give in, but then he sneered. You don't get it, do you? You're not in control here. They'll come for you. They'll come for her. They'll come for everyone you care about. You're too late. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about him anymore. The serpents weren't just a gang. They were part of something bigger. And if we didn't act now, it was going to get even worse. I stood up, feeling a surge of anger. You're out of options, Viper. You're done. I turned to the crew. Search the place. We need everything on this bastard, every bit of intel we can get. The bikers quickly spread out, tearing through the warehouse. As they moved, I kept my eyes on Viper. He was still grinning, but I could see the cracks starting to show. He knew he was losing. Where's the meeting? I demanded. Where are they going to strike next? Viper stayed silent, his eyes narrowing. You'll find out soon enough, he said, his voice dark and full of venom. It's already started. You can't stop it. But I wasn't about to let him get the last word. You're wrong. This ends tonight, Viper. You're not running anything anymore. As the crew continued to search, we gathered everything we could find, documents, maps, and even a few encrypted files from Viper's phone. There was no sign of the rest of the serpents, but we knew they were out there, watching, waiting for their next move. We've got what we need, Phantom said, walking back over to me, a stack of papers in his hand. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a bigger operation behind all this. We've got names, locations, they're planning something big. I took the papers, quickly scanning them. My stomach sank as I realized just how much bigger this was. The Serpents weren't just a local gang. They had ties to organized crime, trafficking, and possibly even law enforcement. This is worse than I thought, I muttered. We have to go after them all. No more waiting. I turned to the crew. Get ready. We're not just going after the Serpents. We're going after everyone who's involved. We knew the clock was ticking. We couldn't waste any more time. Maya was still at the safe house, and though we had done everything we could to keep her safe, I knew the Serpents would stop at nothing to get to her. We were walking a fine line, but there was no turning back now. I couldn't let them hurt her. I couldn't let them hurt anyone else. We had one shot to bring them down, and we weren't going to miss it. The room was tense as everyone geared up, each biker checking their weapons, their gear, and their resolve. We were ready. We had to be. Let's go, I said, my voice steady. Tonight, we finish this. For Maya. For everyone they've hurt. We rode out into the night, the roar of our engines cutting through the silence, as we made our way toward the heart of the Serpents operation. The battle was far from over, but we were more determined than ever to bring this to an end. We weren't backing down. Not now, not ever. I could feel the tension building as we sped through the night, the rumble of our engines vibrating through the air. We had all the intel we needed, but there was no sense of victory yet. We knew where they were meeting, but we also knew that this was far from over. The Serpents might have been reeling from the blows we had dealt them, but they still had power, resources, and the will to keep fighting. They weren't going to give up without a fight. The city was quiet as we approached the meeting location, an old, abandoned factory at the edge of town. It was perfect for them, isolated, hidden in plain sight, and full of blind spots. As we pulled up to the entrance, I motioned for the crew to stop. The place was dark, with no lights visible inside or outside. It looked like any other rundown building, but I knew better. They were in there, waiting. I turned to Phantom. "You've got eyes on the inside, right?" I asked. He nodded, his face serious. "I've been keeping tabs on the place all day. They're in there." I counted at least 6 cars parked outside, so we're not the only ones who know about this. I looked at my crew, knowing this was it. There was no more room for hesitation. We go in hard, fast, and together. We clear the building, find the leaders. No one gets left behind. The bikers nodded in unison, their eyes hard with resolve. We had been through worse, but tonight felt different. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about putting an end to everything the Serpents represented. We were here to protect Maya, to protect the innocent, and to make sure they never had a chance to hurt anyone again. As we approached the entrance, I could see the outlines of the Serpents standing just inside the factory, their silhouettes barely visible in the darkness. We were close now. "Let's do this," I muttered under my breath, then signaled for the crew to move. Phantom led the way, his movements fluid and quiet. We followed closely behind, each step bringing us closer to the heart of the Serpents operation. The inside of the factory was a maze of old equipment and stacks of metal, the air thick with the smell of rust and oil. We moved cautiously, staying in the shadows, each of us taking cover behind whatever we could find. As we neared the main area, I could hear the low murmur of voices. They were gathering, planning, preparing. I nodded to Phantom, who moved forward to get a better look. I could see the tension in his body as he peered around the corner. "There's at least a dozen of them in there," he whispered. "We're going to need to be quick." I motioned for the crew to spread out. We couldn't afford to make noise. This had to be clean. We had the element of surprise, and I wasn't going to waste it. As Phantom slipped past, I took position near the door, my heart pounding. This was the moment. We were going to take them all down, and we weren't going to stop until it was done. I gave the signal, and all at once, we burst through the door, storming into the room. The Serpents were caught off guard, but not for long. They scrambled to their feet, grabbing for their weapons, but it was too late. We were on them in seconds, the sound of punches landing, the crack of bones, and the harsh growl of engines filling the air. I moved through the room, taking out one of their leaders with a swift punch to the jaw. He fell to the floor, unconscious, but I wasn't slowing down. There were more of them to take down. I saw Diesel take down 2 Serpents with one move, his massive frame slamming into them, sending them sprawling to the ground. Phantom was everywhere, his quick movements taking out anyone who tried to escape. We were making progress, but I could tell this wasn't going to be over quickly. These men fought dirty. They weren't going to just give up because we had the upper hand. The fight was brutal, fast-paced, but we were a well-oiled machine, and we didn't stop until the room was cleared. I looked around, catching my breath as I scanned for any stragglers. There were none. "Clear," Phantom called out. We had done it. The Serpents were down. But that wasn't enough. I walked over to the leader I had knocked out earlier, kneeling down beside him. "Where's Viper?" I demanded. He groaned, his eyes flickering open. "He's gone," he spat. "You won't find him. He's already out of town." I felt my jaw tighten. Viper was still one step ahead of us. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We had taken down a small part of their operation, but there was still more to find. "Get him up," I said, signaling to one of the bikers. "We're not done here. We still need answers." The serpent looked at me, his face pale. He was done fighting. He's gone, he repeated, this time his voice shaking. Viper has already left. He's moving fast. You won't catch him. I stood up, my frustration boiling over. This wasn't the end. We had to find him. Viper was still out there, and he had a plan. But now, we had a direction. We knew he was running, and that meant we were one step closer. We weren't finished yet. This was just a battle in a much larger war, and I was going to make sure we finished it. I turned to the crew, my eyes burning with determination. We're not done yet, I said, my voice steady but filled with purpose. We find Viper. We stop him. No one gets away. I could feel the weight of the night settling on me as we closed in on Viper's last known location. The road was dark, the air thick with the promise of something final. We had fought hard, but I knew the last piece of this puzzle was still out there. We had to find Viper, in this madness once and for all. I looked over at the crew, each one of them focused, their determination mirrored in their eyes. The Serpents had been taken down, but their leader was still on the run. We were closing in on him. The trucker who had seen Viper a few hours earlier had given us the information we needed. The old motel on the outskirts of town was where he was hiding. We knew this wasn't going to be easy. It never was with the Serpents. But we were done waiting. This was the end game, and there was no backing down now. I pulled the bike to a stop in front of the rundown motel, the flickering neon sign barely lighting up the parking lot. The place looked deserted, but I knew better than to trust appearances. We were on high alert, every member of the crew ready to move. Phantom was already scanning the area, his sharp eyes catching every detail. We're not the only ones here, he muttered, pointing to a black sedan parked under a dim light near the entrance. Viper's definitely inside. I nodded. We moved fast. We hit him hard. We were careful, moving quietly through the parking lot, making sure we didn't alert anyone inside. The tension was thick, the stillness of the night only adding to the unease. I could feel my pulse quicken, the adrenaline building. This was it. We were walking into the lion's den, and we had no intention of leaving without a fight. As we approached the door of the motel room, I signaled for Phantom to take point. He nodded, his movements fluid and silent as he crept toward the door. He tested the handle. It was locked. That was no surprise. Viper wasn't stupid. But it didn't matter. We had come too far to be stopped now. Phantom motioned to the crew to get into position. I could see Diesel move to the side, ready to flank any potential escape routes. We were ready. Phantom kicked the door open with one swift motion. The sound echoed through the room, and I could hear the shuffle of feet inside. Viper was there. We rushed in, weapons drawn, but the room was empty, save for the faint smell of stale cigarettes and something else I couldn't place. I cursed under my breath. Where is he? I hissed. He's not here, Phantom said, his voice low. He moved quickly to the window, peering outside. But he's not gone far. I turned toward the crew. We split up. He can't be far. Phantom, you're with me. The rest of you, cover the back. If he tries to make a run for it, we won't let him. The crew nodded, and we moved fast. I was furious, but the clock was ticking. Viper had played us long enough. He wasn't going to get away this time. We swept the motel grounds, searching every corner, every inch of the place. But the more I searched, the more I felt the weight of the realization creeping in. We were running out of time. We couldn't let Viper escape again. I moved quickly toward the back exit, my hand on my gun. My heart pounded in my chest, my thoughts running in overdrive. I knew Viper was close, but there was something else gnawing at me. Something didn't feel right. As I reached the corner of the motel, I saw him. Viper, standing by a car, ready to flee. He was looking straight at me, a smirk playing on his lips. You really think you've won? He called out. This is bigger than you. You can't stop it. My blood boiled. You're wrong, Viper, I shouted back, taking a step forward. It ends tonight. Viper sneered, his hand twitching near his pocket. I knew what that meant. He was armed, but I was faster. I took a step forward, pulling my gun out of its holster. I'm not letting you get away, I said, my voice steady. You've hurt too many people. You're done. His eyes darkened, but he didn't flinch. You think it's over? You don't know what's coming. He pulled out a gun, aiming it at me. I didn't hesitate. I fired first, the shot ringing out in the night air. Viper staggered back, his gun slipping from his hand as he fell to the ground. I walked over to him, my heart racing. This was it. The fight was finally over. I knelt down beside him, my gun still aimed at him. You were right about one thing, I said. This was bigger than I thought. But it ends with you. Viper's eyes narrowed, his breath coming in shallow gasps. You're not going to stop them, he whispered, his voice barely audible. They'll come for you, all of you. I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't let it show. Not anymore. I stood up, motioning to the crew to finish the job. We had taken down the Serpents, but the fight wasn't over. Viper had been just one part of a much bigger operation, but we were finished with them. The road ahead would be hard, but we were stronger now, and nothing was going to stop us from protecting those we cared about. As the crew gathered around, I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. We had won tonight, but the fight for justice would never end. Not as long as there were people out there like Viper, ready to take advantage of the innocent. But as long as we had each other, as long as we had the Thunder Wolves, we would keep fighting. For Maya, for everyone, and for the peace we had earned.